Yeah, a lot of times I go from the basis that communism, is not that of the people trying to overthrow the banking establishment. Communism is a tool of the banking establishment to enslave the people and get rid of the middle class. And I had rented to Dr. Anthony Sutton years ago, way back in the 80s. And he had written a book called National Suicide, in which he showed that 80% of the uh, weapons of the Soviet Union were built in the West, from the ships to everything else. And he wrote a little book called National Suicide. And at that time, Charlotte Ezerbet, whose father and grandfather were members of Skull and Bones, sent him a stack of secret papers. And from there, he wrote America's Secret Establishment. But in his National Suicide, most of the names that were in there, the key people, were, the Averell Harrimans and McGeorge Bundys and that whole inner core. And again, they come from the satanic cultish order. And his book shows that William Russell, one of the co-founders, actually trained in Germany under one of the Illuminati and came back. And William Russell, the other co-founder, was involved in the drug trade. But they only induct 15 people per year, which is amazingly small, I think, for the tremendous power that they've always had. And they grew from there. Alphonso Taft, one of the founders, ended up Secretary of Defense under General Grant. And William Howard Taft, his son, became the governor of Cuba and then of the Philippines when we started our expansion with the phony blowing up of the Maine, which was one of the false flags beginning then.
That's right.
And at that time, William Howard Taft started writing legal papers advocating for world trade and world government. And of course, their first attempt at that was the results of the First World War. It was supposed to be the League of Nations as the foundational base for this world government. And the U.S. Senate voted against it. And most of these progressives that are real pain today, they've been put rings been put through their nose, and they're pushing centralization and socialism, which goes hand in hand with the central bankers because they want concentrated power. The senator from California, Myron, I can't think of it, but he was also a U.S. senator. He voted both against the League of Nations and the United Nations. And in California, we have a thing called the referendum, the initiative, and the recall, which is a great power for the people because they can bypass a legislature that's stuck. But these are the guys that have been involved. And of course, the Second World War was the head of both world wars. The Secretary of War was Henry Stimson, who's Skull and Bones. Anyway, what they want to do is regionalize areas and move, continue to centralize government. And it was during the Second World War that the Fabian Society put out a booklet called Regionalism. And it was during the active war, and they said we should do it now while people are concentrated on the war to do what they're doing over here in the United States. And also in England, they sent over Irving Kristol. I don't know if that name rings a bell. He's CIA, and he put a magazine together called Encounter to support the Labor government, Hugh Gaskill. His son is William Kristol, and he's a major figure on Fox over here. And his father wrote a book, Neocons, his father of the neocons. And usually when you think of neocon over here, we think of the Project for a New American Century, calling for a new Pearl Harbor as a reason to extend our empire. And the majority of those people were members of the Council on Foreign Relations, founded by Colonel House, the Dulles brothers, and that network. But this is all this leads directly to the Agenda 21. The Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, the first, his wife, last name was Spellman, and she had huge funds, and she funded the University of Chicago. And in 1938, they set up an organization. I don't know if any of this can be seen, but at the center of it is the University of Chicago, founded David Rockefeller, the Rockefeller family. And there's another left winger, I can't think, a Wall Street banker that was involved with Saul Alinsky, and funded him. And his son was on Alinsky's board. But it's always the very rich. But through these 21 organizations, they have organizations for the Council of Mayors, the city managers, the city finance people. Virtually every slot you have in local or county government, they have an association or organization. But since 1938, they've spread apart a little bit. They've got some of them in Washington, D.C. and around. But this is all orchestrated. They're all manipulated by their monthly newsletters and their annual conventions. And they are all taught, Tavistock style, on, agreeing with hardly any resistance, pushing the global aspects. What was important with setting up this world government was the International Monetary Fund. There was a congressman in Southern California, a Democrat in Orange County. His name, come to me in a minute here, Jerry Voorhees. And he wrote a book during the mid-40s, during the hot war, just as your Fabians were pushing the regionalism there. He wrote a book saying that the Americans here were collaborating with the Nazis. And he says they are going for the cartelization of Europe, and that they are going to do it no matter who wins the war. And he was totally thrown by that because he thought this was a fight to the death. And of course, at the end of the war, the Nazi organizers and scientists were brought to the United States, and we used a lot of their assets. And of course, they were funded actively during the war by the DuPonts and Rockefellers at the same time, unknowns to the American people. And I remember it was James Forrestal, who got fiercely angry because he said that World War II could have been ended 2 years earlier, but they were waiting for the Lend-Lease to fill up the coffers of the Soviets in order to move them into Eastern Europe so that they would have a threat and to organize NATO and a European Union through the Marshall Fund.
Yes.
And the Marshall Fund was, the monies were distributed by Tom Braden, who I happened to debate on Crossfire together with Pat Buchanan some decades ago. But the person they replaced Jerry Voorhees with was Richard Nixon.
Yes.
It was Senator Prescott Bush that came out to California, and there's a famous picture of him adjusting Nixon's hat as Nixon goes into the first congressional race. And of course, Nixon voted in 1948 for the World Resolution right along with Humphrey and the rest of these guys. But when Nixon later became president of the United States, he appointed he appointed George Bush as ambassador to the United Nations. And as ambassador to the United Nations, he put through a program called Mondialization. That was the #1 Agenda 21. And we've got papers floating around somewhere in this room that the city dedicates a portion of their monies to do it, and they were just singing the Brotherhood of Man and a lot of this other stuff. But George Bush was heavily involved, and again, you're talking skull and bones going all the way back from the World War I to Taft, to all of these wars, all of these false flags. All the wars and revolutions have something to do with this very small group that has a nervous system through the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg, and the Trilateral Commission. And when Kennedy printed United States notes instead of Federal Reserve notes, bang. And the people involved in that, McGeorge Bundy was part of the Security Council. McGeorge Bundy was the one that pulled back the airplanes for the raid on Cuba. Castro is and always has been a CIA asset. He was in Colombia when George Marshall was talking to the Organization of American States, or a facsimile, and he was trying to organize South America as a organized Europe with the threat of communism. The European Union, was a result, the defense, and he was trying to do that. And Castro was in Bogota, Colombia, causing the communist riots at that time. Since that time, since '48, he had been to the Council on Foreign Relations on trips, the Rockefellers vacation sometimes in Cuba. He had his honeymoon in the United States. He worked for a real short time in Hollywood. But Castro is their asset. And so anytime you get some rogue dictator going up, they run to Castro and they collaborate, and the CIA can whop them at any time. You look at Gaddafi, or a lot of these other countries where they did this. But McGeorge Bundy was really key. He was also instrumental in the report from Iron Mountain, which was working for the Alternatives of War. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yes.
And in that report, they talk about ecology as a substitute in the function of a uniquely human system of population control. This is ecology. This is false global warming. That's on page 83 of the report from Iron Mountain. The following page, 84, they talk as a motivational function the intensified environmental pollution. And other places, and then they talk how they can increase it, which explains the chemtrails, which is run under an organization near Langley called MITRE, M-I-T-R-E, and the MIT comes from the university. It's now run by James Schlesinger. Anybody can go and do a wiki look on it, and it says that one of their projects, or one of their responsibilities, is to coordinate the FAA, the Department of Defense, and Homeland Security.
Yes.
So a plane can't fly off course unless it goes through this group. They have a shell group, a shadow group called the Belfer Center, and that's located at Harvard. And the head of that is James Schlesinger. Now, it used to be John P. Holdren, who advocated putting sterolants in the water and in the foods. So here you've got the chemtrails, or Operation Cloverleaf, with these guys involved. And the board of directors of the Belfer Center includes Paul Volcker, former head of the Federal Reserve, Wolseley, Douche, who is another head of the CIA, and the owner of the largest aluminum company in the world, in which aluminum is one of the major particulates in the chemtrails. So, and one more thing out of the report from Iron Mountain, same page of 84, under ecological, it says it's a comprehensive program of applied eugenics. So, I mean, their goals are so clear to reduce the world's population that you really can't get out of it. When you look at their book, From Agenda 21, you go to page 313, and they say Agenda 21 programs, a far-reaching program of Agenda 21 to be successful, a concern for the environment must begin to be integrated into every human action. Right out of the report from Iron Mountain. What we manufacture, it says it integrated into every human and personal decision. What we manufacture, what we buy, what we wear, how we travel, what we eat, who we choose as leaders, every single human action. So you can't get any closer to total tyranny than what these guys are up to.
Absolutely, Gary. And another thing is that kind of ties into what we were talking about before. It's this idea of original sin, really, in that law system, because we've been taught that we're a blight on the planet and we have to wipe ourselves out, But it's very interesting also that you mentioned Saul Alinsky, because he gets mentioned a lot here now. They're using Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals to train change agents all over the place. And I've been up against these people, and I can see what they're doing. I've talked to Deborah Tavares about this, and I really want to talk to Deborah soon again, because I've got some updates on what's going on here with that. But this Agenda 21 is being implemented at a frightening speed here now.
Exactly. And again, if you look at all of these guys, they are steeped in Satanism. Saul Alinsky's book was dedicated to Satan. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, members of the Bohemian Grove, Skull and Bones, they crawl into a coffin and use human remains in their rituals. Ronald Reagan is a false icon that the Hegelian right uses as the model. He says a lot of great things, but he did exactly the opposite. And if you go into his background from the early 40s, he was members of multiple communist organizations pushing for Mao. He did a 13 series, thing for the mobilization for democracy, which is, highly communist, from the state of California to the House Committee on Un-American Activities. His handler, his CIA handler, was Cord Meyer. Cord Meyer comes from a group of schools called the 10 School Admission Organization. It's in New England area. It's like St. Paul's and Exeter and a bunch of these. And they matriculate and they screen people for the New World Order and for the secret societies. It's a prep school. And Cord Meyer went to one of those schools and ended up in one of the 4 secret societies at Yale that Dr. Sutton exposed in his America's Secret Establishment. And Cord Meyer was also the head of the United World Federalist. Ronald Reagan was 13 years on the letterhead of the United World Federalist. So, and later on, when he first ran for president, he ran with Richard Schweiker, who was the far leftist Republican senator for president. And then, when he was president, he picked George Bush, and he laid out his cabinet with George Shultz, Bohemian Grove, the Bechtel Organization, Caspar Weinberger, who was praised by the Communist People's World in 1951. And he became part of Bechtel, and he was buying typewriters from communist Romania during the hot war, the hottest part of the Cold War. So, all of these guys, which are the wealthiest, are the ones that are supporting the communists as their tool, as the enemy to keep the people controlled, which is Iron Mountain has to be a primer for people. They have to know it. It's short, it's easy reading, but if they understand that the motivation and how they're kept jumping and so they don't have time to think, it's going to be really important for them.
Yeah, Gary, I've been looking at this documentation that's been coming out and all these change agent organizations that have been set up, and it's called The Big Society over here. The Big Society Unveiled was a show that I did, and these Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals is being used by these people, and they're brazen. They're absolutely brazen, but there's a very sinister side to it, which I'm actually looking into at the moment. And there is an agenda. There's a race-specific agenda within it as well, I believe. And this is being carried out. We are definitely being wiped out, basically. I think, especially the idea of what British is. Obviously, national sovereignty has to go. We know that under Agenda 21, but what's being done is very, very insidious, and it's all done with the very cloak and dagger. For instance, there's change agents using Saul Alinsky's rule for radicals, putting out local newspaper here, and they're talking about all these areas that they're in, that are getting into agreement with them, all these different places that are agreeing to have high density housing put in with constant surveillance and overlook. For instance, there's an organisation in the borough that I live, Waltham Forest in northeast London, and it's called Significant Seams, and it came from nowhere, and it says strengthening the seams of community, and it's got these sort of middle-aged ladies in there with embroideries in the window and stuff like that. Guess what? It's nothing to do with sewing whatsoever. It's a hub for monitoring what's going on locally, and they've got a website with the council, and you go into the local post office and you find out who they're linked to, this place called Significant Seams. Why would Significant Seams be linked to Transport for London?
Well, it's Stasi with knitting needles. It's the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove.
Exactly here
in the United States, in our community, which was the development of Agenda 21. We have Leon Panetta. Leon Panetta campaigned for Nelson Rockefeller in the early 60s. And part of Agenda 21 is really important. The two books, the two plans that are related is one, the Philip Drew Administrator, written by Colonel House, and he advocates the North American Union in there and a dictatorship. And from that, Nelson Rockefeller wrote the book, The New Federalism, in which he advocates Agenda 21 and getting rid of the counties and the cities and making things more efficient. And so Leon Panetta has been an apparatchik for the Rockefeller family since then. He was in the Nixon White House when they wanted to put Nelson Rockefeller in. They almost did it. They got Nixon out, and Ford appointed Nelson Rockefeller as vice president. But it didn't pan out for him. Later, he was Rockefeller's man inside the Clinton White House as chief of staff. He was the co-chair of the Law of the Sea treaties with one of the Rockefellers, which was to turn the seas, the minerals over to the United Nations. He was the co-chair of the California Common Cause, which was put together by the Rockefeller brothers family as a force against power. And here he is co-chair. In fact, this last election, they're lobbying and they're all over the place. Locally in our community, they put in a program called Next Door, and they're disguising it as a neighborhood watch, but instead it's controlled by the sheriff, and it was put together by Greylock. And if anybody Googles Greylock, it's CIA venture capitalist. Zuckerberg praises Greylock for all the help they gave him in setting up Facebook. But I know exactly what you're seeing there. But if you watch the foundations, you're going to see that these are the sources of of all the little nonprofits. And if you pull that away, the followers drop aside. But they have to pay. They have to push and pay, and of course with the newspapers and the radio, just nudging everybody to the slaughterhouse, they're getting away with it.
Well, absolutely, it's great to have that historical background, Gary. It's very, very important because when I try to get this across to people, what they don't really understand, because they can't get their heads around why they're being targeted. They go, why would they want to do that? Well, it's sometimes difficult to get beyond that, but if you get to the point of looking at something that happened here locally, for instance, this Transport for London are funding a thing called Mini Holland schemes. Oh, Mini Holland, great. Everyone will be on bikes because there's going to be no cars, right? Now, what they did is they recruited all these cycling groups and people from transition towns, and loads of change agents have been brought into the area under unlimited, UN limited, locality, regenerate, Citizens UK. And these are called community interest groups, right? So these community interest groups get set up, and all of a sudden, you've got hundreds of cyclists appearing from nowhere, yeah? And these people with Lycra on, cycling their kids around in little buggies, these heavy-duty Marxists, coming in, putting their kids at enormous risk, dragging them around on the back of bikes in little kind of canvas-covered buggies, But when this happened, it was a trial, and nobody knew about it. So they closed off about a half a mile, of an area. They closed off all the infrastructure, all the roads. Buses and ambulances couldn't get through. They had wardens there. And meanwhile, you've got all these eco-fascists partying in the street as though it's fantastic and it's all about cycling. Well, if it was all about cycling, there'd be cycle lanes. There's already cycle lanes everywhere. If it was all about cycling, there'd be dedicated footpaths for cycling through this area. There already are.
Yeah, well, they really are being brainwashed, and it's like veal. They're stuffing people with things that they think they like or is supposed to be good, that they live in 200 square feet and they have to either walk or bicycle. What they don't realize is the massive culling and the killing that's ahead, and it's been pronounced from so many different sources that this is really something to keep them busy and concentrated as they up the kill. I mean, the killing's going on. You see young people getting cancer from, gee, they're not even teenagers, some of them yet, but young mothers and families, and it's so deliberate. And the chemtrails is so obvious. The GMOs and the fluoride, it's horrific. And the drugs.
Gary, that's a good word for it. It's absolutely horrific, and I think this is the problem that people have got. They've been so dumbed down now, especially through the media. Because if I look at to the BBC here, I'm seeing something that's for a 13-year-old.
Yes.
No one would believe their news stories. Their news stories are ridiculous.
Well,
they are ridiculous, and people have been dumbed down to this level. And it's also, I was talking to someone about this today, that it's really fashionable here to be willfully ignorant and stupid. And this is all this Facebook culture and social media. You know, LMAFO, LOL. It's like, in fact, you actually see it. You see people go like, "Oh, I've just had a really bad car accident." Lol. Laugh out loud. It's like, but and all this is deliberate as well. There's this whole kind of once you see it, it's very difficult not to look like some kind of lunatic when you're out and about, because you're pointing it out all the time. But people do get it when it comes home to them, and it's coming home to them. Round here, the property prices are being ramped up artificially, absolutely escalated ridiculously. Now, what they're also doing is putting in loads of sustainable development housing. So there's going to be 1,000 new flats in a very small area where I live, which is going to kill the infrastructure. Obviously, they control parking zones everywhere, and people think that this is a good idea. They go, "Oh, I'll be able to park outside my house." Yes, but you're going to have to pay an annual fee, and guess what? Your car's going to be too powerful. You go to work in your van, yeah, or you take your estate car or your sedan, right? You go to work, and you need your tools in the back. They ain't going to be doing that anymore, because it's going to cost you so much money to park outside that they're going to wipe that out. The only thing that's going to be allowed to be able to park is a smart car, yeah, these tiny things. So people don't quite get it yet.
Well, I think it's beyond that. I think these things that are usually built near the railroads and so forth really aren't for these people. It is maybe just for a short time before the troops occupy them. They're built more like barracks with the minimal services. That's why you don't need cars and stuff, because it'll be buses and trains. Hitler's boxcars. We'll take them away, and the stone and guards will, create some peace, and they'll be done away with.
There's a point I was going to get to, which is very important. You've just brought me onto that, because that's exactly a good point to bring that in. Because when people said, "Why are they closing off this area?" In other words, you've got a whole area that's inaccessible. Yeah, well, that can be quarantined, and it's got two major arterial routes on either side of it. So you've closed the whole area down. It's a martial law area. Yeah, they can just close it down simply. Now, and that's what it's about, because it's in those Agenda 21 documents. Part of these hive communities is that they're easy to segregate, and basically that's what they're doing. You can see what they're doing. You can see it on the multiple levels. But of course, now it's all about cycling, isn't it? Don't think so.
Well, the other thing they've been doing for a long time, and I guess they noticed during World War II that there were areas of Europe where people could get up into the mountains and pretty much avoid the stuff. But they've been doing the rural cleansing here for probably 20 years, 25 years in California. So, they're driving people into the cities and into places where they can't survive. Although with the new technology, they can fly over and see if there's a warm body or not, and so being out in the boonies doesn't necessarily protect you. So I just see when they're in the United States, when they're buying so many munitions for inoculant agencies, it's in their hollow point. They're forbidden to use in legitimate war. People have to. They better wake up. You can't just go back to your TV.
Agree. Yeah, and this is the front end of it, really. They're doing exactly the same thing here. All right, Britain is a much smaller country, and it's a lot easier to control in a way, but the rural areas are being depopulated, and I've seen evidence that certain parts of this country are being deliberately decimated, and the children there are being subverted. Their minds are being really badly affected and changed by things like subversive drama, very subversive drama, which is absolutely hideous. And I'm going to do a report on this at some point, just gathering this evidence. But when it comes down to it, it's the same thing. These people come in, they're facilitators. The change agents come in. They're all these people who are community organisers, you know. And I was watching Deborah Tavares in that public meeting with the Delphi technique, because when in that show where we talked about that, we found that they were doing that in Occupy in St. Paul's within a few weeks. We learned about the Delphi technique there and did a whole show on it, and it's called, there's one called the Puppet Masters of Occupy, showing how the change agent comes in, turns it into consensus and climate change. And everyone's going, wait a minute, it was about the financial system 2 weeks ago, you know, and they've got them chanting these slogans, and it really is incredible that there's so many of these people. I kind of don't know where they're coming from, because I hear it in all walks of life, you know. A lady phoned me up yesterday who's doing some stuff about the National Health Service, what's happening in hospitals, and I had to explain this stuff to her, that these people are change agents. The reason they don't listen is because they're trained not to. They're trained to get consensus, you know. It's in your face, isn't it?
But you're talking about Delphi technique right here in the report from Iron Mountain, page 108. Bingo, it's right there. And you know, that series, The Prisoner, that was in England, that was based on Inverness. And the Rudolf Hess coming over, and the little village that's totally controlled with the spy in the eye and all that type of stuff. That, you know, that's what they're presenting. That's what, you know, that's a model. That's their fictitious model. But again, they don't need so many people. I mean, they're going down to the Georgia Guidestones of 500,000 people around the world, and so they've got to, you know, clean their parks out of this human trash and disease. And they're incredibly hateful. They're organized evil, and I don't know how we get people to get beyond, keep chasing the stone or the noise in the bush, rather than going after the individuals that are making the decisions. And I think that's where it's going to make a difference, because these people have names. We need to name them, and we need to keep that kicking around so that they feel as vulnerable as we do.
Public liability is very important with this, because this is what I've been saying. I'm trying to work out a way of getting this across simply, and I think that basically what they're advocating here is that they're forming more and more parish councils. Okay, let's look what parish councils for. It's about total control, always has been, always was, and it was all about the registration of the person, and basically you'd be put in front of the magistrate, you go in the poorhouse. Yeah, that's really all the parish council is. Their duty of care is about liabilities. Now, they're forming these so-called parish councils to make it sound like it's all tea and cakes with the vicar, but it's nothing to do with that. It's giving the local authority more and more power, and the local authorities or councils are assuming more and more power. And these people who've been in the local authority here for years are now saying it's just the kind of change we need. They've been totally programmed. We're talking about people in their 50s and 60s here. They should know better. These people are absolute, they're the enemy of the people. And people have to realize that these local authorities are now the enemy. They are going to take everything you've got.
Well, here, well, in the United States and in California, the city councils and the county board of supervisors mostly rubber stamp what these administrative officers and city managers that belong to Rockefeller's 1313 push in front of them. But even there, they belong to the regional agencies. One is Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, AMBAG. Those are where the big heavy-duty meetings are, and those are the trans-jurisdictional ones where the federal and the state funds and the World Bank ICLEI takes in the Monterey Bay area. They control the whole policy making for 3 counties under AMBAG, and that's the damn World Bank. The 3 newspapers were bought by Bill Gates Foundation, so he's a Bilderberger. So nobody has any idea. You got Leon Panetta, who's a godfather here, King Cog. Right. And his little minion, Sam Farr, who's a congressman now, wrote the foreword to the local Agenda 21. And you got the Packard Foundation, just putting money to outright communists to do their things for the environment. They literally bought some communists to do the work, to do their dirty work. And there was James Coonan, I think, was the name of a guy that wrote the Strawberry Statement about the Chicago riots during the Democratic National Convention decades ago. And he said, yeah, there's some Arco and Rockefeller guys that are trying to buy themselves some revolutionaries here. But that's what they do. I mean, they go in there and they offer them some damn money, and I guess it's your protest against the monopolies isn't so bad if you get a check from them. So.
Well, this is it, isn't it? And all these so-called public officials and that they're all paid off. They basically turn their backs on their responsibilities and worried about their bank balance and their short-term interests. And those are the sort of people we've got to get rid of. We have to get rid of them. They've got to go.
Yeah. Well, we had a group in our area called the Resource for Nonviolence. It's been there about 30 years. Yeah. And just last Friday or the Friday before, they brought in a woman who puts on her resume that she's a team member from the Council on Foreign Relations. And the Resource Center for Nonviolence is supposed to be against all these wars that are going on all over the place. And here you got the majority of CFR guys on, PNAC and Project for a New American Century, and they're in charge of every damn war that's going on.
Of course, you've got to give them what they want and get both sides. It's Coke and Pepsi argument, divide and rule, and people think in this country that there's a democratic system. They still think that all these MPs in the House of Parliament, this ancient kind of historical British establishment, they actually think that these people have some kind of say in what's going on. And they don't. There's an agenda, and that's it. I mean, we've got this Mayor of London, this Boris Johnson, public school boy. He's a bit of a buffoon. Oh, what a clown he is. He comes out with some kind of clumsy comments here and there. So they think, bitter man of the people. Absolute bloody idiot from Oxford or wherever he's from. And we've got these Oxbridge fools who get trained and bought into this kind of thing because the mind control they use in these universities, because I've met many of them, the public school system gives them an assumption of power. We're the guys who are going to change things. We're the guys who are going and actually they're the biggest sheep on the planet because they believe that the system is righteous and it's supporting them and it's going to support their children. They have no idea what's going on whatsoever, and these are the most easily used people on the planet.
Well, this resource center, which has matriculated a few people into the county board of supervisors and the city governments down there, has a nice building right across from the county building. And last time I looked, they were funded by the Kellogg Foundation. And the Kellogg Foundation sponsored the first 1912 eugenics conference and the pure race, whatever it is. And these guys are all pro-parenthood, which is, killed more than half the black babies in the United States last year. And they're just evil, and their do-goodness is hard for me to see, but they group think, and they, believe they're doing God's work when they're doing Satan's. It's amazing.
They get in everywhere. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I think that there's been a huge increase in these amount of trained change agents coming in. We know that because David Cameron over here said there was going to be at least 10,000 of these people trained. Now, we're talking about people in the public and private sector. These aren't people who are just being trained by a government. These are being trained by the private sector. And people need to understand this, that basically it's a corporate looting. That's all it is. And these corporations are taking everything. For instance, this is another example, which really backs up this corporate takeover is that the Metropolitan Police management is now Halliburton, Kellogg Brown and Root. So the military-industrial complex are running the Metropolitan Police. Now, there's a quote that I always like to give about the Metropolitan Police, it was an investigation called Operation Tiberius, which stated that the Metropolitan Police were inherently corrupt and could not be changed. Always put that one in an affidavit. That's always very good. But the people don't realise that the police are a private security force, and they are no longer there to uphold the law. They are not there for that at all. And ever since the Olympics here, there's been police just drive around in these huge police carriers with riot shields on the windscreen and all that. And that never used to happen. You'll be having a cup of coffee, right, in the West End of London somewhere, in Soho, say, and they've got these armoured vehicles going around all day long, and no one seems to question it, with about 2 or 3 police in. What are they doing? And I went past one the other day, and they're all eating their fish and chips in this armoured police van, and it's like, what is going on? You know, people don't realise that we're already under martial law in this country.
Yeah, our police used to be dressed in blue and were called peace officers.
Yes.
And it's changed. Although some of them are alert. We've got Alex Jones in Santa Cruz that's played twice a day. I don't know. We're just blessed. So there's some people out there in the police. Some of the police are more informed than the general public. And if I ever see them eating coffee or something like that, I'll try to give them a DVD or that information, because the guys with the guns or billy clubs should be informed. And information is getting out there. I don't know how this race and time is going to pan out. And exactly.
I think they're ahead with what they're doing. I really do, Gary, because I have seen the implementation of Agenda 21 in the past 2 years absolutely accelerate through the roof around here. It was just bits and pieces before. You'd see little things happening. Now we've got the Walthamstow Wetlands Project. We've got the Wetlands Project now. This huge area of marshland with nothing on it but a railway line and some reservoirs is now going to be, guess what? A nature reserve. But so this was open public land. And this is the double speak they use. They say it's going to have 4 new entrances. Wait a minute. It didn't have any entrances before. You just walked on it. So if it's got entrances, that's going to mean it's going to be closed off, right? And there's all this stuff going on, and there's sustainable development housing, architects for sustainable development with their tiny little flats, and there's stuff being built around here now out of wood.
Yeah, they're setting up for martial law and for all these things that they've been setting up. Like the World Bank has been supplying the laws for the county and the cities, and they stamp it under ecology or some nice name. But there's been 2 attempts in the last 5 years, I think, to create a nuclear event.
Yes.
One was that guy that had worked for MITRE, which controls the skies, and he was ended up in a New Jersey dump, I think. Can't think of his name. Do you remember that 4 or 5 years ago? I'll think of his name in a little bit. And then Daniel Eschelon wrote a book about the Soviet guy that was being set up like bin Laden to take the fall for a nuclear accident inside the United States. And that was about 3 years ago now. So they're all ready again to drop the big one on us. And when that happens, I don't see anybody resisting whatever they want to do to us, whatever law they want to implode, or whatever tax, or whatever movement of peoples, or God only knows. But
well, exactly, and I see it happening, getting more and more like that. I mean, we've been covering on my show forced evictions and how property is being stolen with the help of the police, private interests, bent solicitors, and government quangos, basically. So they're stealing people's property for very small amounts of money, and the police are helping with that because the police are assisting private interests because the police are private. And we now know that the police and these so-called bailiff companies have a meeting beforehand, and there's always a private investigator there at an eviction. These things I didn't know before. It's all becoming very clear. But everything's going to be centered around these hive cities, these hotspots, and it's becoming one where I'm living now. I want to give you an example of some of this Agenda 21 being played out, and the fact that because they're doing everything by consensus, and people are going, we don't seem to have any say in what's going on locally. Yeah, we don't have any say in what's going on locally. These developments appear. They're putting in Tesco's in everywhere. It's like sustainable development housing with constant surveillance and ruining in the infrastructure. And none of the local businesses are getting a say in anything. And we've got this newspaper, and it's, guess what? This is the leader of the council. So he's gone, what we're going to do? What we're going to do? They're not being fooled enough anymore. I know what we'll do. We need to talk. We need to talk. And this guy has been the leader of the council here for years. And I used to go to council meetings, and I thought he was a reprehensible person. Now I know that he actually is. Chris Robbins of Waltham Forest Council. Now, he actually was confronted by members of the public about a development which went through. Everybody was against it. They put in shops that they took away local shops, and they brought in Tesco's. They built a block of flats which was hugely overlooked properties, devalued people's property. And this guy says it's just the kind of change we need. It's incredible. And when in the village part of where I live, they call it the village, this bit they're going to close off to traffic. There was a woman there, and she was saying what a great idea it was, and we need a petition. We've got to get everyone to agree with this to have this mini Holland. You know, this thing that's not really about cycling, but closing off loads of roads and causing chaos. And this fellow said, well, I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. I think it's a really bad idea. And she said, you just don't want change. You're frightened of change, aren't you?
There you go. How many people still have cash versus using the plastic? Because when the plastic gets cut off, it'll be right into the wall.
Oh, I know. I try and deal in nothing but cash. This is what I say. It's a, one, keep the council and the government out of your business. 2, deal in cash all the time. 3, barter. Well, that's going to make me a domestic terrorist now.
Yeah,
cash, you know.
Yeah, with that Ebola, scenario in that NASA report. That NASA report was written about 3 months before 9/11. And in there, they're talking about the CNN syndrome, about killing Americans on live TV in color, and of course we've seen that in the last couple of weeks with the with the throats and all that type of stuff.
Absolutely.
So they're invoking this whole thing, and they're still selling this overpopulation, whereas Europe and I think half the world can't replace itself now, and it's going fast. You've got the in 1917 they had the Red Cross mission to the Soviet Union. And what they did, it was mostly bankers that were cutting all the deals with Lenin and getting the manganese and cutting their deals to make sure that the Bolsheviks, which it took them a couple of years to really get control, but it was all Wall Street and Federal Reserve that got in there to create the 2 world wars, which killed hundreds of millions. And of course, we're doing the same thing with Ebola by putting troops, into West Africa. I can't rationalize that anyway, except that they're going after the assets and they're killing the Indians, so to speak, in order to have their presence in Africa, like they've done with the Middle East, leaving everybody to fight. And with this new Republican majority, most of them the Republicans belong to this Ripon Society. This is really important for people outside the country to know, even inside.
Yeah, I don't know about this. Yeah.
It was founded by Nelson Rockefeller when he was running for trying to go after Goldwater in '64. But if you look up Ripon Society, you can find those Republicans that are for the New World Order, the phony. So you can see the Jeb Bushes and you can separate them immediately as to. You put a tail on that donkey right away when you find them on the Ripon Society. But we've got a number of them in California, and there's a number of them running for president.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. It's interesting to get your perspective because we're talking about the same looting operation, the same genocide. They've just slightly different brand names, but they're all under the same thing, which is United Nations Agenda 21. And I think there is a bit of hope here. I found something last night which actually shocked me. It's a document, and it's called Selected Decisions and Selected Documents of the IMF, 36th issue, United Nations Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the Specialized Agencies and Annex 5, prepared by the Legal Department of the IMF. right? Now, in this convention, the word standard clauses refers to provision of articles. Here we go. The words specialized agencies. This is what we need. Specialized agencies. These are all the people who are, we're going to find out, are above the law, okay? The International Labour Organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the World Health Organization, the Universal Postal Union, the International Telecommunications Union, and any other agency in relationship with the United Nations in accordance with Articles 57 and 63 of the Charter. Now, this is very interesting. Property, funds and assets, Section 4. The specialised agencies, their property and assets, wherever located and by whomsoever held, shall enjoy immunity from every form of legal process, except, forget this, Gary, that you'll love this, except insofar as in any particular case they have expressly waived their immunity.
It's like the UN Charter, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to be above the law. So it goes, it is, however, understood that no waiver of immunity shall extend to any measure of execution. So even if you want to abide by the law, you can't, right? So it says here, Section 7, without being restricted by financial controls, regulations, or moratoria of any kind. The specialised agencies may hold funds, gold, or currency of any kind and operate accounts in any currency. The specialised agencies may freely transfer their funds, gold, or currency from one country to another or within any country and convert any currency held by them into any other currency. The specialised agencies, their assets, income, and all other property shall be exempt from all direct taxes. It is understood, however, that the specialised agencies will not claim exemption from taxes which are in fact no more than charges for public utility services. It goes on about customs, they're immune to customs and excise, well, of course, but I just think that's absolutely incredible. So you've got the IMF and the UN openly stating they are above the law, and any organisation under them is above the law, and the law cannot be enforced on them.
Yeah, there's an excellent book that somebody put their life into over here that's available, since this is transatlantic and these are the big boys and it's an international, it's a multinational deal these days. Anyway, it's called Who's Who of the Elite. And he goes through all these people who are members of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, or Bilderbergers, and some members that belong to more of them. And it's really astounding and an eye-opener, and I encourage people out there to get that, because that's going to be your handbook to, who's good and who's bad out there.
Well, yeah, it's trying to find anyone that's good, really, isn't it? This is the problem. They've all been co-opted. I mean, I think that the key to it, though, is this local government. If people can actually get in there and start making these people accountable, holding them personally accountable. I've done it slightly here and there. I have the odd court case. I go for these people. I call them out. I put their names on the internet when they commit fraud. I'll call any of them out. But the point is, more people need to be doing it, and this cannot be implemented locally without your consent, really, and consent is tacit. So basically, we're in a tacit agreement here. Because we're not protesting, they're going to do it. And we've got so many people out there who are subverting everything. I don't think people are aware enough of what change agents are and how they're operating, that they're starting to become aware of it. People are coming onto the show who can't understand what's happening to them. They're going to these public meetings, they're going to things like about what's happening in the NHS, the National Health Service here, the hospitals, and they're just getting railroaded, and they come out and they go, what just happened in there?
It's organized evil. They've got to understand that there are evil people and that it's organized, and these guys have had centuries at it. I mean, without that, and the fact that right now their agenda is to eliminate 80%, 85% of the people, and you're one of them. And
I think it's the problem we're up against, Gary, as well, is that when you mention population to people, they go, well, the planet is overpopulated.
Exactly.
And they all say that without thinking about it, And I say, okay, well, let me send you this Centre for Population Change graph here then, and let's see how the world's population has declined since 1800. How the fertility is declining. Fertility's just completely dropped, basically.
Yeah, look at Russia. It is lost 20% or something like that, and
Yeah, but it's really about what we do now. I think. I mean, it is very frustrating because they seem to have. I was talking to Deborah Tavares, and what's going on in California is absolutely horrific. You know, it's horrific what's going on there, and the wealth is being stripped from the people. All the assets are being stripped. All the aspirations are being stripped, and basically we're going to have nothing left. So we've got nothing to lose now.
Deborah's
We haven't
going
got
to
anything
be
to
here.
lose. We've lost it all.
Tell her Deborah's
Really?
going to be here in a few minutes.
Yeah, Deborah's going to be here in a few minutes, so.
Oh, great.
And I think we're about at the end of this tape here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. If people want to go to my website, it's newsexpose.org, and they'll find information about Greylock and the CIA Stasi neighborhood program. They'll find a lot about the MITRE, which is formally in charge of the chemtrails. They'll find stuff about Reagan, who is the false hero of the right that is brought up by Republicans. And there's some good stuff on Saul Alinsky in there, too. But
Well, that's great. I also I'd recommend anyone go to your site. I haven't looked at it before. And my site's called windowsontheworld.net. We do a show every Sunday at 9 p.m. GMT, which goes out. We cover a wide variety of stuff, and there's a lot on this big society, Agenda 21, how it's being rolled out, who's doing it, and what we can do about it on the website. So we're all trying our best, really. Yeah. That's great, Gary. I've really enjoyed that.
well, thank you very much. Great to meet you. And
Yeah, we should do this more. I mean, the amount of information that's coming my way, and the same as with you, it's incredible. Because what we can do is help each other fill in any gaps, because there's always gaps. And if we're across the pond from each other, there's stuff being played out slightly differently over there, and there's information over there that we don't have. So I think that's really important that we keep this sort of dialogue going now.
yeah, they've got another project it'd take some time to talk about. It's called Civinomics, and it looks like it's supposed to be a friendly way to reach government, but it acts as an ombudsman to keep people away from the policy makers and to get them over on the side away from the people that are making the decisions. It's pretty clever, and there's several names for it, and locally it's called Civinomics, and of course the politicians love it.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, as I say, it's ramped up here. It's ramped up. It's a bit off the charts, really. The area I'm in has been targeted as one of these boroughs, you know, for sustainable development. They're basically hiving the whole population. There's cell phone towers outside all these flats they're building, and we've talked about that before. Once you get onto that side of it, though, people can't quite get their heads around it until they look at the facts that no real, proper, scientific testing has been done on Wi-Fi and EMFs in this close vicinity of people. It's not really been done. It's not even been tested properly on rats. So basically, we're not even lab rats. We've got no idea what these frequencies are doing. And when I was at the People's Voice, the television station, there was definitely people being zapped there. I was one of them. Whether they were doing it through cell towers and through the Wi-Fi, I don't know.
Yeah, we got that. We
yeah.
got that Fort Meade report about radio waves causing dizziness, nauseousness, or unconsciousness. One last little thing. Ed Griffin, who wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island, this December 12th and 13th, he's having Operation Uplift, and it's people from 34 different countries meeting in Paso Robles, California. If there's anybody with the capacity to get out there and get involved, I think I hope this mix is going to kick some things off. But he's been a reliable guy, and he figures it's a last chance to get people cooking again.
Well, that sounds great, and that's something I'll be definitely looking into. There's 3 shows that I'd recommend people look at on the website here, people in the UK, and I think people in the States will find it interesting too. One's called Mini Holland Schemes, Fake Green equals Fake Green Fascism. We put that out a couple of weeks ago. There's another one called The Big Society Exposed, and the one I did with Deborah called The Smart Green Genocide. And there's information in there about everything we've been talking about, all the government documents there, all the evidence is there. It's been played out in front of you, and you're having no say in this whatsoever at all. So I think everybody needs to get involved now.
That's terrific. Our editor says we got 1 minute left here, so again, it was great talking to you, and maybe we can swap more atrocities in the future.
Well, that's great, Gary. Yeah, I mean, the true horror of what's coming to the human race is something that I really enjoy talking about, because in these last days of putting up the fight that we can, then yeah, we need to be sharing this information and getting it out there. I'm very frustrated with people really in this country, because they still got their heads in the sand to a certain degree. They'll go there to a certain extent with this stuff, but then they'll go, well, what can I do? And I just, at that point, just walk off, because this is the reason the human race have been enslaved for thousands of years. It's what I was talking about with Dr. Ed. Maybe we have been genetically modified to be dumbed down and subservient, but I think a few of us are breaking the mold, which is great.
Well, maybe the guy with the slingshot can get this Goliath in the right spot. That might make the difference. But nothing's predetermined, so we always got a shot at the moon.
That's great, Gary. Well, I'll be looking at your website, newsexposed.org, and I hope people will look at windowsontheworld.net and join us every Sunday night, 9 p.m. GMT, for a new show. We love to hear from people, and we're building this thing all the time. We're gonna try and wake as many people up as possible.
Terrific. Good talking to you.
Thanks, Gary.